Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Jewish Professionals Podcast, the JP Podcast. I'm Hillel Bainach.
And I'm Benjamin Winters, and we're students at Yeshiva University, just looking for some advice.
Our aim is to bring to you Jewish professionals from every industry to learn from their successes and failures, how they grew in their career and Jewish identity, and made a Kiddush Hashem along the way.
We hope you can apply what you learned through the lessons to your own life as they pass the torch to us, the next generation. We can't wait to go along this journey with you. This is the Jewish Professionals Podcast.
Woo! Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the JP Podcast, the Jewish Professionals Podcast. It's an exciting time in New York City.
Thank God we're here. It's funny because I got a couple comments on my last episode that I wasn't dressed so nicely. So I was thinking about, for the first time ever, I actually put on a tux for a wedding. I was really excited. I put on a tux and I didn't want to take it off. Like, I didn't want to shower that night. I wanted to wear it the next day. So I was thinking about bringing it to the episode, but my mom thought it was a bad idea. So we didn't end up doing it, but we're still in a jacket.
The problem is, we finally come in a jacket and we think we're going to outdress the guest. And now we have our guest come in with a handkerchief. There's always another level.
The proper terminology is the pocket square.
The pocket square.
Because you don't really use it as a handkerchief.
Once you have a guest saying pocket square, he's a seasoned professional. And I think that's exactly what we have here today. So it's my honor to introduce Meir Lewis, current investment banker, head of financial institutions group at Nomura. The best bank out there, I might add. Ben, take us through a little more of his accomplishments.
Yeah, so Meir is actually a YU graduate. He graduated with a pretty high GPA. We can let him get into his time in YU.
Sure.
And we could speak about that more. He was at Citi. He's been at places like Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, now at Nomura, and he's on the board of a bunch of different really important Jewish organizations. Shout out to one of my favorite, Moshava IO.
Yeah.
I'm a product of that one, and Meir sits on the board there. But Meir, thanks so much for coming in and joining us.
It's great to be here. Love the setup and love what you guys are doing.
Right. Speaking about Moshava, early camp, childhood, take us back to where you grew up, maybe where you went to camp.
Ooh, what a transition over there.
Yeah, we're getting good at this.
Smooth. We're getting good. We're getting good over here.
Okay. Moshava. Interesting. It's come full circle. I actually grew up in early years in Long Island, a small town called Bell Harbor on the beach. Not so populous right now, but I think it's still a summer place. But it was a small Jewish community adjacent to the five towns. I went to elementary school at Yeshiva Torah Chaim South Shore, so a real stark yeshiva. Occasionally I meet guys from there. Fun fact, I saw Shalom Rosner recently, and Rav Aryeh Leibowitz recently, and David Bashevkin recently. And all four of us, the three of them and me, had the same Rebbe that taught us to learn Gemara.
Wow.
Rabbi Sharchon. I think Shalom Rosner said he switched classes right before him or something, but the rest of them were taught Gemara for the first time from the same rabbi who's still teaching at South Shore. Rabbi Sharchon, best Rebbe I've had. Certainly one of the best rabbis I've had my whole life.
Who's the last one in that starting five? You named me four a lethal lineup right there.
Moshe Cornell.
Oh, okay.
Shout out to Moshe Cornell.
Shout out Moshe Cornell.
Good friend of ours. By the way, anytime a school has more names in it, like Yeshiva, Torah Chaim South Shore, the starker it is. I think that's a genuine.
The better products they produce.
And so tying it back to Moshava, a very, I think, unique thing my parents did is while I was in this yeshiva, which by the way had a full day of yeshiva during the Israeli Day Parade. It was one of those kind of places. Uh-huh. They sent me to Camp Moshava, B'nai Kiva, Zionist camp. It was co-ed. This was an all-boys school. It was co-ed camp. So I was having this divergent experience where I was in this kind of stark yeshiva during the year and going to a co-ed Zionist camp during the summer.
The balance. The dialectic.
You grow out the payas during the year, cut them off for the summers.
So that's started going to Moshava, and of all things, this is so wild that you started with Moshava. Really good friends there, lifelong friends that I made in camp that I was in a bunk with from when I was 10 years old. I got together with a friend of mine last night from Moshava. We met each other when we were 10 or 11 years old. His name is David Honig. I was at the Kuzhnitz Shtivel on the west side. He was the keynote speaker. I had done this a couple months ago, and I brought him in as the keynote speaker to tell his life story. Wow. And we've been friends for 35 years.
We take advertising, by the way. If Camp Moshava wants to pay us for this, we'll take fees.
There we go. Met at Moshava is for couples, but it also can be for professionals. The phrase that they say.
Yeah, met my wife there also. So.
Oh, okay. Double advertisement over there. So you said you started it in that yeshiva, and then you eventually ended up. You knew you were going to go to YU. Was that the path for most of the kids ever there?
So interestingly, I don't exactly know what my parents were thinking, but I think they were concerned with where I would go to high school. They weren't sure what the options were out there. And when I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, my parents moved to Manhattan, which was a very unpopular time to move to Manhattan. My dad was in real estate. He bought a condemned brownstone on the west side. It wasn't really condemned, but it was in like really, really bad shape for very, very cheap. And he and my mom renovated this townhouse. It was a multifamily townhouse that had like rent-controlled tenants, et cetera. And during the course of my high school, where I did go to MTA and then YU, they renovated this townhouse into what became a one-family house and then ultimately like a triplex and a duplex. And so during the course of my high school, not only did I have 5 different bedrooms, because there were tenants in this building, so they would move me and my brothers to a 2-bedroom apartment on the first floor while they renovated downstairs. Then they'd move me into like a studio and move us around. And so through high school, I had lived in the city, which was pretty cool. A lot of people didn't do that. Basically, I had like my own apartment in this walk-up townhouse and was going through this like crazy construction project.
Like a nomad in your own place.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's fair to say you got into M&A pretty young. You're acquiring all these different apartments.
Yeah. It was great experience. And great living in the city.
So the natural move from MTA is YU.
I went to YU early admissions. So spent 3 years at MTA.
Skip your senior year, right?
Skipped the senior year. I didn't. I didn't. It was better for all parties involved that I leave MTA and go to YU. But it ended up being like a great experience to like start college, be with an older, more mature crowd, start taking college classes, and start even as a senior in high school, start getting a little bit more of a perspective because I was in class with kids who were post-Israel, 2-3 years older than me, who were focused on their careers, graduate school, and other things. So I felt like it was a very maturing experience, and it was also like super, super fun because like as fun as YU is, the dorms, etc. Imagine being in it as a senior in high school. It's even more fun.
Right.
It's like a sleepover party every night.
Yeah.
No bedtime, no parent to tell you go to sleep. You're just
It's
you and
great.
the boys.
And I'm still to this day. So it's like 25 plus over 25 years later, still friends with the guys that I was early admissions with. My roommate, Al Markovich, speak to him every single week. Other guys there, Dove Gottlieb, Doug Rothschild. We were like a crew, a bunch of other guys. We speak weekly.
Okay, Hillel, this is a challenge for us.
You're right.
Let's see.
I don't know if I can manage weekly. We can maybe do every other month.
Okay, we can
What's
see.
that? What's that?
We can see if we can do it.
I want to ask, were you always a serious student? Did you take your studies seriously throughout your progression?
Super serious student, super serious, super diligent student to a fault. I think this is like a little bit in the regret category. Graduated college with a 3.9 something GPA.
3.95.
Yeah, I think it was 3.
We can round that up.
Yeah, it's 3.95.
I feel bad. That one teacher gave you an A-.
It was a B+ that I got from the dean. I was in linear algebra with the dean at the time. He's a very tough teacher, but learned a lot through that.
Is it too late to appeal? Or
It's a good idea. It's good for the record.
exactly.
I think I was like A on everything, perfect on everything, very, very diligent, and that's just a little of my my attribute. But I think it was too much. I think in school you don't need a 3.98 or 3.95. Should make time for other things, jobs. I did have some jobs, clubs, and other activities. So I went through college like pretty quick and did well. But I think even when I look at resumes now from candidates, if I see a 3.95, I have a negative reaction.
Interesting.
I have a negative reaction because I'm like, okay, person's a perfectionist. That's a very good attribute. But are they well-rounded? Are they making enough time for the other things like jobs, clubs, et cetera?
So do you think that's specific maybe to you and your own experience, or in the job world as a whole, managers and people that are hiring don't just want one-dimensional students that are just going to plug away and just maybe do it because it's the path?
Yeah, I think it's a general. It's a general, which is it means your attitude, and this was my attitude back then, is you're focusing on what's right in front of you and what's achievable, and you're not having a broad enough vision as to some of the other things you could be doing.
And I hope Why doesn't listen to this, but I tell Ben every day, stop going to class. Please stop going to class. And that's not the advice you thought you'd be hearing today. This was all planned.
I was going to say, Mr. 3.95 GPA was going to tell me that I was doing a good job, being diligent in class, putting in the work. But I guess, Mom, I'm sorry if I start to cut, but this is just what I'm hearing.
So what was that? You said you worked a few jobs. What were your first kind of experiences in the professional world?
First job I got through the placement office. Crazy job. I'm a math major, and the placement office got a call. There was a consulting firm in Fort Lee, New Jersey called Quasher Lipton. They ended up, now they're part of Mellon. They were acquired, and now they're part of Mellon. They did actuarial consulting, particularly like pension and benefit consulting. And they had hired an actuary who had a PhD in math and was blind, totally blind. And they needed somebody to read him his textbooks. That was the job. So they're like, it's going to pay $15 an hour. You have to get to Fort Lee, New Jersey and read him textbooks for like 10 hours a week. And so that's what I did. So I'd walk across the bridge. It's like a mile long, but it's a nice walk. It's kind of cool. The building was right on the other side. They paid me $15 an hour to like read math textbooks to this guy, and he would do the math in his head, and he'd study for exams, and he'd do problem sets, etc. I was also taking actuarial exams at the time, so there was some synergy for doing that. And in between exams, they gave me some other jobs to do, and it was a great job. It paid really well, and it was like an office environment.
Could you explain to our listeners what an actuary does, or what that role is?
Sure. It's like being a statistician where you're calculating probabilities of insurance contracts that are often tied to mortality and longevity. Mortality is the probability that someone's going to die. The longevity is the probability that they're going to live. And so you guys are very, very young, but when you get older and people start managing their wealth and their assets and their estates, it's often tied into insurance-related contracts because, like, I might live longer, I need more money if I live longer, and a lot of pension and post-retirement benefits are also statistically tied to how long will somebody live, how healthy will they be, et cetera. Right. And so actuaries calculate it's basically like a complicated discounted cash flow model of somebody's probability of how long they're going to live, how much money they'll need, et cetera.
The finance is coming out. It's seeping through.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't know about so young. I mean, we have someone turning 21 this month, actually.
That's true. Stay tuned, baby. Stay tuned. Big birthday coming.
Big birthday. But, okay, so you learned a lot. I guess it forced you to know a lot about math, reading these textbooks.
Yeah, know a lot about math. And happens to be, he was, his name was Saeed Golnabi. He was, I think, like Iraqi, at the time.
That is
and
cool.
So I'm like this Jewish kid, and he's like this Iraqi guy, and we're like relating over math. And they loved me there because like I'd spend hours and hours with him going through the math. And so it was just like a very good work experience. One of my first work experience with like anybody.
Yeah. And then how did you go from there and transition into finance?
So I ended up doing a couple of other actuarial jobs. Worked at a couple of I had some summer internships. One was at AIG, one was at New York Life. So I was like in the job market, having various internships, building the resume. What I found, this gets to a little bit of know yourself, is at the time, this is like, you got to get into my attitude. I'm a perfectionist at school. I'm getting 3.95. I'm taking these actuary exams. Very good boy. And I'm looking for like a balabatish parnasa, like something that's like a lot of work-life balance,
right?
Gives me time to learn, gives me time to do other things. Actuary is like a very balanced job. You don't work so hard. And what I just found on these internships is they'd give me an assignment and I'd grind away, I'd build a model, I'd develop some analysis, and I'd look up and it was like 6, 7 o'clock at night and everyone was gone. I'm like the last one left in the office. And it turns out like a lot of those jobs, certainly at the time at these big insurance companies, were more lifestyle jobs where you could leave at 5 o'clock, you could balance your life, you could, do other things. And just over the internships, I just kind of felt like that wasn't me. I wanted something a little more ambitious, a little more aggressive, required a little more risk, a little more communication, a little more of a reach, a little more hard work. And that's when I started looking elsewhere for jobs. So one of the things I did, I know these days everybody does a lot of networking. Like networking is like big. There was no internet back then, or maybe the internet just started, but there's no LinkedIn. And so I'm at this actuary job, and I'm basically, frankly, like a little bored, right? I'm like a little bored. I don't have enough to do. And I find a national directory of actuaries in America. There's like 5,000 actuaries in America. New York Life, MetLife, all these different insurance companies. And then I notice a couple of investment banks. And I'm like, what are they doing at the investment banks? And I see like there's an actuary at Morgan Stanley. And there's an actuary at Goldman Sachs. And I'm like, what are these guys even doing? And again, there's no LinkedIn. There's no way to look this up. But the directory does have contact information. So email did come out. Like it was like the first summer of email. And so I sent these guys emails, or some of them I called, and I said, I'm an actuarial intern. I found you in this directory. I see you work at Goldman Sachs, whatever. What do you do? Can I speak to you? And I think, those types of cold emails, I'm not sure how much people respond these days. But back then, again, email was very novel, particularly to get, think of today, how many people like carpet bomb everybody on LinkedIn. Oh, yeah. But back then, nobody had ever gotten an email from a college student. It was like brand new. And so
you started the trend.
Yeah. People responded and they're like,
look what you've done, by the way. Look at
explosive. And people responded and they were like, let's have coffee. We'd love to meet. We'd love to chat. We'd love to this. We'd love to that. And so I started speaking with these people, and some of them managed the Morgan Stanley pension. So, okay, they were just like an in-house like pension manager. But some of them were like, oh, I got into trading and now I do derivatives and now I do some complicated thing, or I'm an advisor to insurance companies. I do asset management. And through that networking, I found like a different kind of job. It was at a more ambitious kind of startup insurance company that was doing more interesting things. And I ended up working there. I'll get to the rest of the story whenever we get there, but I ended up working there, and that ended up being a more interesting, experience.
I think anyone can learn from is that when you're shooting off those cold emails, like you said, you're literally just asking to learn. You weren't asking for anything. You're just saying, I want to know. I want to hear.
I wasn't asking for a job. I wasn't asking for a referral. I was just like, what do you do?
Exactly.
Right. And
I don't know if that works these days. Like, people, but
I was going to say, I saw some people on LinkedIn celebrating because recently there was like one day where Apollo is the site that you can use to get anyone's email. And like there was this one day, I guess, where Apollo was like down. And like you had all these people celebrating on LinkedIn, like no emails coming in at 9:03 a.m. from every college.
But at the same time, it's something you have to do. It's something you have to do, and even in today's world, that's how you get a shot. You probably have to take more shots. You're not going to have an 100% hit rate, but
yeah, I think what I've observed, what I've seen is these days, particularly in investment banking and finance, you need to network your way into a job. It's hard to just apply online. There's thousands and thousands of people who are applying, so you need to navigate through your friends' parents, your parents' friends, LinkedIn, right, other connections, alumni connections. And you have to not do it to like 10 people or 20 people. You do have to reach out to hundreds of people.
Yeah. When you, just on this, we've spoken with some of our other guests about this, about networking. And Hillel mentioned that it's a lot about just asking to learn. How do you get over the hump when you know at the end of the day you are going to make an ask for someone and there is a level of transactionalism when it comes to the conversation, and you're not feeling like a fraud when you're speaking with them, when at the end of the day you're going to want that referral?
Yeah. So I think I've thought about this over the time. I think you kind of get to the transaction part sooner. I think that's what makes it easier. Like if you're on a phone for an hour with somebody and then you get to can you make the referral? I think that's when it gets awkward. I think if you make 5-10 minutes of small talk or chit chat or ask some questions and then get to it sooner, I think that actually makes it easier, because it is your main, think of the ask as the main course in the conversation. And so you don't want to like have an hour appetizer before getting to the main course.
Right.
Have the main course in the middle.
Well, this is actually interesting because we've had a more junior banker, but for you as a senior banker, when you're getting on a call with a college student, someone trying to break in, what are you looking for and what stands out to you?
Okay.
Not the GPA. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It's not your GPA that's going to do it.
Okay. It's long, so maybe I'll be short about it.
Buckle down. We're ready.
I would say, I did a call this week, and it's one of those things you could tell in a minute what the situation is. And so, like 1 minute into the conversation, it was like, "Tell me about your day. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Okay, listen, let's just get to it. You got to give a damn." And I see you have like a messy background behind you, like sit in like with a clean background behind you. It's obviously on Zoom. And he had like, not like a messy bed that would have been like terrible, but he had like shelves and some other stuff that just looked unruly. I'm like, set yourself up in a clean location with a clean background behind you. You could have like like a sports poster or something, but like don't have a lot of clutter behind you. And I said, you didn't shave. Like you're unshaven. Like this was an arranged call, like shave, put on a tie, put on a jacket. I know ties are controversial, debatable. Okay. I won't overdo the tie with you guys. Certainly not the pocket square.
Oh no. We can go for round 2.
Yeah.
We'll be ready next time.
But like put yourself together.
Right.
And then you could tell right away, this is like one thing that a lot of people do. And they kind of tell you their whole story. Like when I was a boy, I was this, and I got interested in that. And then I found my way to finance, and I'm really passionate about it. I'm like, I don't need the whole story. I don't need, just tell me like, what was your last internship, and like get into it. And so people do this with their resumes, and they do this in the interviews. They kind of feel like they need to tell you their whole story. And maybe eventually you get to like the background story, the origin, but get to it. Like get to it within a minute.
Do you think that's specifically when you're speaking with someone who's senior and someone who you are literally stealing away time from the clients that they would be working with?
I think it's
Or
anybody.
anyone, even an analyst.
I think even an analyst, like get to the point. I don't want to hear your college essay. I don't want to hear your life story.
Right.
I don't want to hear about your like challenges with adversity and how you overcame and
Right.
how you discovered
Right.
investment banking is going to be your passion. Just like tell me what you're interested in doing
Right.
and kind of what
It just drops the weight, I think, off everyone's shoulders, and the elephant in the room is just exposed, and you're not sort of just dancing around what
Exactly.
you know you're going to talk about.
Get to it. Get to it. Rip off the Band-Aid a little bit. You get better at it. And by the way, like, you know, there's room for a little small talk, a little how's your day going type stuff. But people, you know, just get to it. I think that's the advice I would give.
Sage.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move forward in this story though.
Okay.
I want to know what's next. Where did you go after, like, where was that first internship? What bank was it at?
This was okay. I had this job working at this like reinsurance company doing derivatives, like, and I was like transacting with investment banks. So I was like Wall Street adjacent, I would say. And I met a girl, and the girl,
The story ends there.
the girl became my wife. And one of our dreams, going back to Moshava, bringing it back to the beginning, was to try Israel. It wasn't like a make aliyah type of thing, but it was like, we're getting married, let's move to Israel, let's try that. Maybe I'll learn, maybe I'll work, I don't really know, but let's like, you know, there was no Ramat Eshkol back then, but it was like the equivalent,
Okay.
right?
Ramada School adjacent. We're
Right,
going.
right,
Okay,
right,
fine.
exactly.
Fine.
And the thing to remember about that time, this was in 2000, it was a raging bull market. It was the best market I've ever experienced in terms of the market, in terms of valuations, and particularly in terms of jobs. So like the vibe among college students was, it's not about whether you got a job. Every single person had a job. It's did you get the ideal job? Because this was startup. This was like internet startup like 1.0, where people were graduating college, doing startups, raising money, like being CEO of a startup. Now, these startups were discountcruises.com. They didn't last. They went under. But a lot of people had jobs. And so getting a job like wasn't even a question. I had several job offers from all these insurance companies and whatever. So I just got married, but I quit my job. And I said, we're moving to Israel. We're giving it a shot. and that's what we're going to do. So a couple months after we got married, we moved to Israel. And I did stage it a little. I didn't just show up in Israel. I was like, I think I'm going to work in Israel. I've been working. There's a big startup economy. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in Israel. Let me apply for jobs. And I started like networking and applying for jobs. And the job I got was investment banking.
In Israel.
In Israel. So I'm like, showed up in Israel, just got married, just quit my job, showed up, and I got a job it was Salomon Brothers, that merged with Smith Barney, that was now Citi. So it was like Salomon Brothers, but it was like, today it's Citi. Mm-hmm. And we got to Israel, we got settled, I got started, and I showed up. This is like the craziest thing. I showed up for my first day in investment banking without really knowing what investment banking was. Like, didn't know. The reason they hired me is because I spoke English, which was very important to them because they were taking companies public in NASDAQ. I was very good at Excel, like really, really good at Excel. And people didn't really have that skill set as well back then. Like now, every college kid takes Excel courses and knows Excel.
Right.
Back then, if you were a college kid who knew Excel, it was like, wow, like Wharton kids did that. Nobody else did that. And so I knew Excel. I spoke English. And like, I think I got along with the folks there. And they were extremely, extremely busy. Like they were super busy, didn't have enough staffing, couldn't hire enough people. And so literally first day on the job. So I show up and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. What do I need to do? And they're like, set up your computer, whatever, fine. So I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. What's my job? And they're like, well, we're having a meeting tomorrow with some company. We want to talk to them about maybe going public. It's an initial conversation. We want you to, I kind of screwed up the story a little bit, but they were like, we want you to put together this introductory presentation, like a quals book, if people are familiar with that. So I was like, okay, great. When do you need this by? Like, I thought like Wednesday, Thursday. They're like, this is for tomorrow morning. Like, we need that tonight. And I'm like, I just got here.
First day on the job.
First day on the job. And it's like, there's all these like macros and these formats and the way it worked back then in banking in a lot of offices, but particularly in a regional office in Tel Aviv, is that you had to like paste in all the stuff and get the page numbers right and the format right. And like people told me like all the little things like I shouldn't screw up. But then you also had to print it. And back then a color printer was like zzz, 1 page, zzz, 2 pages, right? It was like slow printing. And then you had to bind it, which means you have to take like this like hole puncher type machine and punch it through, and then open up this like wire frame and stick it in and close the wire frame. And again, I'm doing all of this for the first time on the first day on the job. So I finally like get 6 copies of this book formatted and printed and bound and burnt. You like burnt the holes through the pages and bound. And I get out of the office at 4 a.m.
People thought Wall Street was intense. Wait till they get to Tel Aviv.
4 a.m. Because I needed to wait for something from America, and America's 7 hours behind. So like I didn't even get the data I needed till midnight. And so first day on the job was an all-nighter.
They say welcome to the league moment. It didn't take long for you.
Yeah. How brutal is that? How brutal is that? Just walking in.
We're doing our dream. We're moving to Israel. We can't wait. I'll see you 2 days, honey.
Yeah, it was, and like, I didn't even have a cell phone, so it was a rude awakening. It ended up being like a great team of guys helping Israeli companies raise money, do mergers, like some of that. I remember one, and you learn about it. I was in the they did a lot of technology. I remember I went to a lot of meetings, which isn't typical in investment banking. So in investment banking, you're an analyst, you're in the office just grinding out these books. But in Israel, it was like they were trying to like build a network, whatever. So I remember going to this one company, this is 25 years ago. And we show up and the VP is like, what do you guys do? So he goes, we do like a compression technology that allows videos on cell phones. Cell phones were like brand new back then. Like I got my first cell phone that year. And so they're like, let's see. And the guy opens up like a flip phone, like one of those old school flip phones. There's a little screen, like a 1-inch screen. And they play a video in that screen. It's like a music video in that screen. And the VP's like looking at it. And it's like a video and it's tiny. It's 1-inch screen on a flip phone. never seen anything. And he goes, I don't get it. Who the hell's going to watch a video on their phone?
Uh-oh.
But it was, it ended up being, I would say, the experience working in Israel with Israeli companies, it was all great. And I got binding those books in like 6 minutes. By the end of the year, you learn, you get quicker.
So you don't even need to go to the gym. I mean, you're just, the books are the workout.
But the book binding was like a whole like procession back then to finalize those books. But what ended up happening that year is it was a year that war broke out in Israel.
Right.
The Intifada broke out.
Right.
And this is also like an interesting just personal history is I started that job in September 2000 and the market had actually already peaked in March of 2000. So I didn't even realize it then, all the activity, all the busyness, the market was over already. People thought it would bounce back, it would recover, it was just some up and down. But the NASDAQ and the tech bubble, it basically was already over. But then when war broke out and other things broke out.
And then 9/11, I guess.
And then so things deteriorated pretty quickly in Israel. The market fell apart, deals fell apart. I'll get to 9/11 and how it led into that. But I worked on this one merger between two like broadband wireless equipment manufacturers. That was like a technology that was developed in Israel. It was like military technology that had been commercialized. And we were merging two companies. Each of them had $1 billion market cap. So it was like $1 billion merging with $1 billion. And together it was going to be a $2 billion, some cost savings, some synergies. That was the rationale for the merger. By the time the deal closed, they had each traded down by 90%. So we merged 100 with 100. And post-close, even with the synergies and the cost takeouts, et cetera, the pro forma market cap was like $75 million. So like $2 billion of value went down to $75 million. And that was across the board. Like that was as good as it was when I was at YU, everybody getting jobs, startups, all that other stuff. These stocks traded down 95%. It was a brutal like up and down in the market.
For people going into finance, do you think most of them realize how much of like a flowy market it is and how many ups and downs there are?
I don't think so. I don't think people realize how much volatility there is.
They're all about the good times, but
And
they don't realize.
industries come and go. It took 20 years for tech to recover from those days.
Right. And there a lot of it is about what time you get in. Like when Dean Strauss was here, he corrected me when I said that the market was bleak when it comes to the job market right now. But it's definitely not, I think, what you were describing in 2000.
I think it's also very accentuated when you're in college. So meaning I have a certain amount of job volatility, but like I'm not so worried about it. But as you get more and more junior, the volatility swings more and more. So that when you're in college, it's like feast or famine.
Right.
Exactly. So you make your way back to America. First of all, I'm to say I'm happy you did because I'm a product of your mentorship. So I really appreciate that. But how did that story go?
So I would say I'd layer in a little bit of a personal dynamic here, which was, so the market was falling apart and I was working really hard and it was US hours. It was very hard. It was very difficult, like on my wife as well. But like one of the bigger issues were I was like 23, 24 years old. So was my wife. We were like early 20s and we had a lot of friends in America. But in Israel, the people our age, just how it works in Israel, where people go to Hesder and Yeshiva and Army and then university, the people our age were doing that stuff. So everybody our age, like young married couples, they were in Yeshiva or in the Army or in university. And I was like working and my wife was also working.
You're like 3 years ahead.
Exactly. And the people that I was working with, like my colleagues at work, were, some of them were Israeli. They were 28 years old and had 2 children and lived in Ramat Aviv. And so there was this like social disconnect where I don't think that's the same today, but back then it was like very striking that the people my age were not doing what I was doing and the people I was working were several years ahead. So anyway, for all those reasons, I requested to transfer back to New York. I was transferred back to the New York group and flew back that September. So I was basically like working in Israel for a year. and then transferred back to the Tech Israel group in New York. And my second day back in New York was 9/11. And
Holy cow.
Yeah, and this was Citigroup downtown in Tribeca, and I was getting in early because I was still working with Israel. I was actually planning. I remember being in early that morning. I was planning a closing dinner for this like merger that kind of everything evaporated, but we were still going to celebrate because we got a deal done. And I was on the phone like with the banker on the other side, like coordinating some logistics, and boom, poke up my head right out the window at the World Trade Center. People didn't really know what was happening. Was it a pipe that exploded? Was it an accident? And a bunch of bankers get in early. So it was like 8:30 in the morning. So I was like one of the only analysts there, but it was a bunch of the MDs were there. And nobody had videos on their phones, right? Technology wasn't invented yet. So we went to the head of the group's office, senior banker who had a TV in his office. That was like a posh
cool
thing.
guy.
Yeah, that was like the
Plush.
posh thing. Yeah, and we were watching, nobody knew what happened. And then second plane flew right by, and everyone's like, everybody out. And left, walked out of the building, standing outside, looking at the towers. Tribeca is like 7 or 8 blocks away. So far enough to like not get hit, not get impacted, but like you're seeing some real stuff happen. And people were saying like, maybe they'll fall down. You should get out of here. They're, like people thought they'd like fall over. That's like what people are talking about on the street. And so I was like, I remember from Israel, because Israel, the Intifada broke out. There were these car bombs like that went off at like nightclubs and Sparrows and that type of thing. And the attitude in Israel was, if there's a bomb, you run the other direction because there could be a second, or you want to get away from it.
Yeah.
So I was like, Israel lessons, and I jumped on the subway. Subway was still running. I probably caught the last subway, got out of there, and got back home. And my takeaway from that is, terror will follow you. Like terror was breaking out in Israel, made it a very difficult situation, but terror follows you.
Was that like, oh my gosh?
Hearing this story, by the way, I think what it really kind of brings into perspective for me is you work so hard, like to 4 a.m. on these, stressful transactions, and then you realize how, flimsy they really are and how unimportant they are in the grand scheme of things.
Totally. Office was closed for like 2 months. No IPOs, no activity. The tech had, like, as bad as it was, it just got worse. That department, that whole tech group that I was kind of a part of, it went from 25 officers. It was like a whole floor with like, he covered software, he covered telecom software, he covered semiconductor software, semiconductors, all the different verticals. Like there were coverage officers in each of those offices. Went from 25 people to like 3 people. This is also like crazy early story. So that was in September. No IPOs for a month, no activity, offices closed. People are like still traumatized, trying to figure out what to do. And they're like, we just don't have the workflow. And by that time, I came in as a second-year analyst, so I was a third-year analyst. That was like the way things were characterized back then. So my boss, great guy, worked with him, Joel Meir Lewis, still in touch, still friends, terrific mentor, still in the business, lives in Israel. He brought me into my office it was around like Thanksgiving time. It was like November. So it was like 2 months later. And he said, here's what's happening. Your class was the largest analyst class we've ever hired, right? Because it was like tech, 200 analysts were in our class. He said, today we're making decisions around every analyst. Either they're going to be fired or they're going to be promoted to associate. And he goes, Meir, you're promoted to associate.
Whew. You have, oh my gosh.
How crazy.
He definitely built up the hype.
How crazy is that moment?
Okay.
How crazy is that moment?
Okay, you got my heart stopped dropping.
And by the way, 9/11, no jobs, all the startups are
Oh my gosh.
closed.
It's a scary time.
Like I'm at a point where like I was working really hard, and all my like, let's say 20 friends were like at startups, wearing shorts, firing Nerf guns, building like internet sites. 19 of them were unemployed. Yeah.
But this brings you to a point. How do you make yourself indispensable? If you're somebody coming into investment banking, how do you make yourself so valuable to the team that they just can't get rid of you?
Yeah, I would say 2 things. That was like a real lesson then. I would say 2 things. One is So I made my way back. I'd started in insurance, and the insurance group was super busy because this is the biggest insurance loss in like a decade. And so they had to raise money. Insurance companies were going under because they were exposed to this. Rates were going up. So part of the condition is you're promoted, but you got to find another group. And I found the insurance group, and like kind of had some background.
Bring it on, basically.
So one of the things was defensive sector, big user of capital, always active, been around forever. At the time, tech was kind of a fad, comes and goes. You could say the same thing about biotech, same thing about real estate, same thing about some other industries that kind of come and go. But there are defensive sectors that have their own volatility, but not as much. And it's like the capital-intensive businesses like financial institutions, energy. You could say real estate, though it's going through a moment now. A lot of industrial sectors. And so one is like, forget about what's like super hot at the time. Go with what is a big user of capital, needs services, and
Stability.
has stability and has regular activity. And then I wasn't out of the woods yet, right? There were some tough times as well because now I'm in financial institutions group, and it's like, okay, these are like big old institutions, tons of deals, they need money. There's a lot to do. But then we had the financial crisis. Now it was a couple of years later.
Right.
So here I'm a vice president now. So made it through the associate years. I'm a vice president. I'm in the financial institutions group. And then a meteor hits the earth there. And we go through the global financial crisis. And like I'm at Citigroup where the stock went from 55 to $1. Went from $55 a share to $1. And this is where I work. This is like the company I work at just went down 98%. And I'm having like these deja vu flashbacks. Like, I'm not a tech company. Like, I get it. Like some internet company could go down 98%, but a bank, that's crazy. And so, and here I'm more vulnerable because I'm more senior. I'm getting paid more. There's like more at stake.
Right.
And so the second way to make yourself indispensable is if you're, when the wind blows, grab the tree you're hanging on to. And just like I was involved in a deal and own the deal and be critical to the deal. And like nobody could update that model except me. Like I'm the only one who like had my hand on like every bit of the model. And so it does happen during these really tough times. They're sitting around the table and they're like, someone's got to go. And they're like, it can't be him because nobody else can do the model. And it makes yourself critical on a revenue generating transaction.
So you've stuck with investment banking through the highs and lows. You're still in investment banking now.
Yeah.
Was there never a point in this tenure, especially during all these ups and downs, when you have a good resume to just maybe pivot to something that's more stable and something that's less?
Yeah, there were opportunities. Some were missed opportunities. I would say two things kept me in the game. One is you do feel like you're learning and you're growing, and being a first-year analyst is different than being a second-year analyst. It's different than being an associate. It's different than a senior associate. It's different than being a VP. And those things come at you like every other year. So every other year, you're getting some promotion where your responsibilities change. You're less in control of the model. You're more in control of the deal. You're more in control of the client. You're more in control of the like industry focus. So as you get promoted, your focus changes and the market changes. Raging bull market, issue equity. Down market, do consolidating M&A. Low interest rates, issue debt. High interest rates, do something else. And so the market changes, your job changes, the clients change, the deals change. It's just like really interesting, and if you're quick Twitter, if you like variety and challenging yourself and having new experiences, it like continues even today.
Right.
It's a great experience. Every year's a new year. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is it's a little bit of like a buy side, sell side thing, which is a lot of friends went to the buy side. Some of them did really well. A lot of them did not so well. Because when you're on the buy side, it's your track record. And you need a track record, and you got to develop that track record, and you got to preserve that track record. And if you mess it up, like maybe you can recover, but there's like not a lot of guys my age on the buy side who don't have a really good track record, a really good, defensible, like articulate track record. Like if you get to a certain tenor in your career, 10 years in, 15, 20 years in, if you're on the buy side, there's other jobs you could do in and around, like adjacent, in and around the buy side. But the real success comes from your track record, and like you can't fake that. And you got to have that. Whereas when you're on the sell side, it's a little more experimental. Like I tried selling it, didn't work. Try selling something else.
Right.
That one worked. I'm going to talk about that one. And there's other situations like some do better than others, but I think it gives you the ability to like focus on the successes more.
Okay. Something I've always wanted to get into that I think from your story really illustrates to me the experience of finance is surfing. Always wanted to surf, but it feels like there's always a new wave coming. And even in our generation, Ben, like COVID, there's always something new and you always got to be on your toes.
Yeah, there's something new challenge, new experience, new client, new situation. I just had, can't talk about it, but I'll tell you one that I did last year, which is I'm in insurance. Now, insurance is like hundreds of years old, right? Like fire insurance, auto insurance is like the big innovation. Like they invented cars and people needed to insure cars. Even that is like super, super old. And there's room for like little bits of innovation, but cyber insurance has been like a very big issue in the sector because it used to be somebody would start a business, like a small business owner. They have stores, they need property insurance. They have workers, they need workers' comp insurance. They have trucks, they need commercial auto insurance. Now, a lot of small businesses don't have any of that. There's no stores, there's no like physical labor employees, there's no trucks. It's just data, right? It's like a couple of guys developing something online with data.
They're Nerf guns.
And you need to protect the data. And so there's like innovative. So I sold this like cyber insurance company. It was very interesting. So that was like a interesting recent like innovation in the sector.
I remember when I was getting on the phone with you, I knew every detail about that deal, and I never got to use it, unfortunately.
You could do it right now.
I'm a little rusty.
Well, now you know. You just want to go straight to it. He doesn't care about the deal. Skip the quit that.
Exactly. But can you talk about? I know you've kind of transferred around some, lateral movements.
Yeah.
What led to that?
That's a tough call. I spent. The first times, the hardest, started my career, I spent 10 years at Citigroup through the tech, Israel, tech, financial institutions, the impact on the stock price. Might as well tell the story because it's true. I had actually in shul, my parents lived on the west side. I went to Lincoln Square Synagogue, and this banker used to come around to say Kaddish occasionally. One of his parents passed away. He would say Kaddish, and like he became friendly with a bunch of folks. And I would talk to him. My dad would talk to him. Some other people would talk to him, and it was Paul Taubman, who runs PJT now. But back then, he was a MD in M&A at Morgan Stanley. He became the head of the M&A group, the head of the investment banking group, and president of the firm. But I remember before the financial crisis, we were sitting in shul on Yom Kippur. He came for Yom Kippur, and we're sitting in shul, and he's like, "How's it going?" And it's like 06, I guess, or 06, I think it was like 06, 07. And I was like, pretty good. I'm a vice president. I'm working on deals. I've been doing this for a while. He's like, I think it's going to be pretty bad. He like saw the signs of what's to come. And sure enough, the financial crisis came like pretty rapidly after that. And he recruited me to Morgan Stanley. It took a while, but eventually he brought me over to Morgan Stanley. And it was an amazing experience working with him, working with the team there. It was like a different type of culture. It was like an M&A culture. It was really like expansive to my own experience set. I'd done a lot of capital markets deals and some M&A. This was like really much more focused on M&A. And it was a great experience. So I'd say I was like recruited out of a firm that I had been a part of for 10 years. And my main regret is that I didn't do it sooner.
Really?
I didn't do it sooner. A lot of times when you're at a company, you get pumped with like the culture and you got to stay and it's never going to be good anywhere else. And and you're never going to be good anywhere else. There's like a lot of tools used to retain you. And I think, that experience and then other experience showed me that a lot of times you are more valuable somewhere else. Now, not after 6 months, but there I was 10 years. And I stayed at Morgan Stanley long after Paul left. I was there for 7 years. I was a managing director there. And I was recruited from there to somewhere else where I got to become the head of a group. And then from there, I was recruited to Nomura, where I am now. And so I think what I've learned is, I'm very loyal, like being part of an organization, building it up, collaborating, working with people. But sometimes you're just more valuable somewhere else. And if you really are a banker and a financial advisor and you think commercially and objectively about financial trade-offs, you have to do the same with yourself. Right. And you have to think, is this where I'm worth most? And just one other way to say it in like banker terms is that public companies, if somebody offers a control premium, like a change of control premium, like a 30% premium to the stock, the company doesn't really have a choice. They need to deliberate and take the decision seriously. But if somebody offers like, here's your stock today, and I'm going to pay you 30% more, 40% more, 20% more, the company has to really consider it. And the same is true about yourself. If somebody shows up and says, I'm going to pay you 30% more than you're currently making, do you really have a choice if you're trying to make commercial decisions?
That's interesting. And I know you've talked to me a lot about loyalty. And so that's interesting. You put in your time at Citi. You were there for 10 years. And at a certain point, you have to, like you're saying, value yourself and what's best for you.
I mean, I don't know how this works, but if for all our baseball listeners, I know there's a stat that's called WAR, WAR. I think it's wins above average or something
Wins
like
above
that.
replacement.
Oh, wins above replacement. I think
And I'm not even a baseball fan.
but I know it measures your personal, like how valuable you are, which is exactly what you're talking about. And that even though you do have loyalties to a company, you also have to think what's in my best interest.
In your best interest and the best interest of the family, because I'm not going to be doing this forever. Right. And, money in the bank makes a big difference. And so there's times when you could call it monetization or trading up or whatever, but there's times where if you really hold yourself to a standard of making commercial decisions, the big boy move is to make a commercial decision about your own self.
That's interesting. And for people trying to consider maybe going into investment banking, when they look at their own strengths and what they're best at, what things should they point an eye to? Like, yeah, this means I should go into investment banking. Like, this skill is gonna be valuable.
Sure. I think the adult skills for banking are good judgment, good advice, trusted relationships, hard work. But I do think the game at the beginning has changed. And the concept of like somebody who didn't know what investment banking was, getting a job and starting, that just doesn't exist today. That's like never going to happen again. And there were other people in my class who were like music majors, and the idea at the time was
I'm laughing right now. Yeah. A music major going into Ivy.
Yeah, one of the people I sat next to was a music major in college, and basically it was again a bull market, an expansive market. Firms were recruiting. They were like, we just want smart, hardworking people, and we're going to train them. And we're going to teach them accounting. And I never took an accounting class before I went into investment banking. That would never happen today. I think the entry point these days does require a portfolio of hard skills, accounting, Excel, PowerPoint, and some basic tools that you could bring to the table. So I think the entry point has changed from my day.
Yeah, and this is kind of twofold because people always want to know, as a basic interview question, why investment banking? What do they answer to that? And so what are the reasons someone should go into investment banking, both, within themselves and also what should they tell the interviewer?
Yeah. I think it's, I don't really have a good answer to that question, like why banking? I think it's want to develop the skill set, want to be part of the transaction economy. I think a lot of people miss that point. That's a point that a lot of people miss because they're interested in stocks and investments and companies, but they miss the transactional element to it. And I think about myself and about other people that I've seen do really well in banking are very like targeted goal-oriented people, like people who like working on a project, finishing it, going to the next project, finishing it, going to the next project, finishing it.
Those are the GPA guys. They're just the GPA guys.
And I think the transactional mindset, like I want to be part of these transactions, working with companies, working with advisors, understanding the economic trade-offs, the legal trade-offs, the strategy trade-offs. I think at the end, it's a very transactional field, and either it attracts transactionally oriented people or it produces people who become transactionally minded.
Yeah. And you've kind of taken your success in business and really given back to the community. Like I mentioned, I've definitely benefited, and I know many YU kids who have. What are some things you've done to give back?
Sure. It's changed a little bit over time. I'll just kind of like list them out, not in a braggadocious way, but just to like kind of give a little bit of that evolution is I've actually been very involved in Yeshiva College. Since I was a couple of years out of school, I was like pulled in by this guy, Mikey Davis. I don't know if you guys know him. He like kind of, I'd been like out of the YU loop because I was off in Israel. I was doing other things. He brought me back in and speak to the students, talk to the students, do some mock interviews, that type of thing. Even when I was maybe like an associate. But really since then, for 20 years, I've been like coming back to speak to students, mock interviews. At some point I joined some kind of committee, like a president's committee. And then I joined the Yeshiva College board. And one of the things I'm most proud of doing for the YU students was trying to address a very specific like job-related issue, which is Bennett Schachter. He was at Goldman Sachs at the time, and I was at Morgan Stanley. And one observation that we made is that students were getting internships, but they weren't closing the deal. Like they were getting the internship, but they weren't converting it into
It's like the finance. It all comes back to finance. It's all the finance.
They weren't like converting it. And so we got together with students during the summer and we're like, what's going on? And the first time we did it was at the end of the summer, and people were like, there actually is no full-time offer for my internship. We're like, well, that's not great. Or, well, I've never had a performance discussion with my manager. We're like, that's not great. And so we started doing it in the beginning of the summer, and we did this for 10 years, which was how to maximize the internship experience, which was like seek feedback, show up early, outperform, be prepared for the job, network.
So I don't want to cut you off there,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of YU students and maybe people not coming from the Ivy Leagues think that they have to necessarily come in and prove themselves, and that I think in any job that you have to sort of set yourself apart, but they feel like that comes with like an extra chip on their shoulder. Do you think people are at that disadvantage coming from this background? Or do you think that anyone going into this industry has to sort of show that they really want it?
Yeah, everyone's got to prove it, because a lot of the firms are, you'll be an internship this summer, so we'll talk about it. But I think a lot of the internships really are an extended interview. Like I interviewed you, asked you some questions, you gave me some good answers. Okay, I'm going to give you a shot. But the real interview is the summer internship. And a lot of people don't have that mindset, which is this isn't like the preview. This is the tryout.
Wow. Interesting. That's a clip right there if I've seen one.
Jeez, I'm like,
Okay, so I know President Frisch as well.
President Frisch.
Moshava. And with some YU. How do you balance? I mean, I know you don't like this question because you like just getting straight to it. But how do you sort of balance all those different responsibilities, allocating also time to your family,
and giving a Daf Yomi shir as well?
Time to the family, Daf Yomi shir, Smicha B'chaver with El Yado Goldberg, which is excellent.
And going skiing. We know you're an avid skier.
Love skiing. And there's YU Frisch Moshava boards. I would say, particularly my experience with these organizations is they're extremely well run and well organized. And so I'm not there to like run anything. I'm looking for areas where I can add value. And with in the case of Moshava, it's like budgeting related because it's summer to summer. There's a lot of variation in costs. So like one area where I get involved is like the budgeting. In Frisch, there's some other things that I get involved with. And at YU, there's a different type of like feedback and interaction. And so it's actually like super liberating in a way that I'm not responsible for everything. But I could find little spots where maybe it's about placement, or it's about a budget, or it's about COVID and those related crises, where I could provide some advice, add some value, and make a contribution.
You think everyone has a responsibility to give back in that way, just because you're saying you're involved with so many different things, but you're just in those pockets of.
So I think different people have different ways to contribute. What I enjoy about it is, in my job, I'm often dealing with boards and a kind of a collective decision-making body. So there's a manager of a company, the CEO of the company, and there's a board that has certain fiduciary responsibilities as well as oversight responsibilities. And I'm often working with the board to arrive at decisions. Do we sell the company? Do we raise money? Do we buy something? And so I spend a lot of time during the working day helping these governance bodies make decisions. And I do find that translates well to these organizations. They're different, they're nonprofit, and it's a different kind of diverse set of board members and stakeholders. But at the end of the day, everybody on all of these boards really cares about the organization, really wants what's best for them, but they often just struggle to arrive at what's the right decision. And it doesn't have to be my answer, but the group needs to come to an answer.
Yeah. True Gemilas Chasadim. You're running all these organizations that really contribute so much to the Jewish world. And Ben, you want to wrap us up with?
Yeah, so we have this tradition where we ask our guest, I guess our listeners might be tired of me giving this intro every single time, but we ask our guests a question, a specific question. What is something that you think that is specific to the finance sector, a skill you've learned, and maybe an experience that you've had that applies across every industry, maybe that people could translate to whatever they're doing, whether it's finance or not?
I think there's a lot of ways to arrive at this, but I think rational decision making it's kind of shocking to me. And I was very bad at this when I was younger. I was a very bad decision maker. I couldn't figure out. I was worried about people's feelings and missing out and other things. And I just really struggled to just make decisions what am I doing tonight? Or where am I staying? Or what are my plans going to be? Or where am I going to go? And I find decision making is a great skill. Now I'm coming at it through a financial lens, and I have certain tools what's the value of decision A versus the value of decision B on an expected value probability weighted basis. The actuary is still there. And so I have my own tools to make decisions. I think there's a lot of other, backgrounds and experiences that help make decision making, but I think it's important to make rational, solid, defensible decisions that you'll continue to live by. And I feel like I'm good at making those decisions myself, and I'm good at helping other people make those decisions.
And do you have any last takeaways, final takeaways as a Jewish professional in the workplace for the audience?
Yeah, you guys didn't hit on this, but I'm just going to throw it out there.
Please.
I was kind of waiting for this topic, which is one thing I found, you guys are in college and it's awesome and you should continue to enjoy. And one of the questions, people often think about is what would I do if I was still in college? How would I spend my time if I was still in college before the rest of life and career took over?
I know one part, which is definitely not just be in the library doing the homework.
Exactly. That was my own regret. I should have been doing more on that front. I think now's the time to form relationships, date, meet people, fall in love, get into romantic situations, because as I find pandas can't mate in captivity. And as you get out there and your job gets more structured and life gets more structured, it's just harder to be relaxed and casual and social with people, because you're working hard, your time is precious. You do find moments and weekends to relax, but it's harder. And I find when you're in college and you have more unstructured free time, it allows you to find that person and find that relationship. And that is basically what happened to me around graduation and shortly after graduation with my wife. And I think it is a window of time that's very precious in the sense that you have so much flexibility to do a lot of things.
I love that. Ben always talks about appreciating the moment, and it's kind of, people are so, focused on getting through college and getting to their job when the most precious moments are passing them by.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good chizuk for anyone listening, for ourselves included. Meir, we really appreciate you coming on, taking the time tonight to join us in the Heights. Take some walk down memory lane, your alma mater. So
The longest episode by far,
Both.
and it was an honor.
This was such a throwback. Wow.
both to MTA and YU. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for all you do for our community, not just within YU, but for the various other organizations that you're a part of. We really appreciate it. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Thanks to JB. Thanks to Ashley. Thank you to John. Thank you to everyone who helps make this podcast. And then, of course, thank you to our listeners. You guys really drive this podcast forward. And we really appreciate you for coming on. And feel free to tune into the next episode, like and subscribe, share with everyone else. We'll see you on the next one.